We have arrived at May 7th, 2026. Welcome into the FFPC Insider Access Show. My name is Eric Balkman. You know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and of course the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman, EricBalkman. What a show we have for you tonight. What a lineup we have for games right now at the FFPC. This is obviously there's going to be more as the season goes on, but we haven't had this many yet this season. Best ball tournament, we'll lead off with that. We changed the grand prize from $300,000 to $400,000 there, just $125 to enter that. $35 entry is all it's going to set you back to join the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, and you can still win $100,000 there as well. The FFPC Big Gorilla is back, $1 million grand prize, the 7 Bananas promo, and the early Rampage tournament going on. So if you like getting into 2 tournaments with 1 team and 1 entry fee, check that out. If you like getting free FFPC teams, check out the 7 Bananas promo as well. The Baby Gorilla is new this year, $125 to enter that. Excuse me, and you can win $100,000 grand prize there as well. We've got Dynasty and Empire Dynasty startups going on for as little as $100, going all the way up to $5,000. So whatever your budget is, we have a Dynasty League for you if you want to play fantasy football year round. Countdown is on until the end of the main event early bird promotion. We got about 3.5 weeks left on that. Get your main event teams registered and paid for. You will save $200 off the price of them. And you'll also be entered into that FFPC Pros versus Joes drawing, where 42 lucky Joes will take on 42 industry pros, with 7 people taking home free FFPC main event entries for 2027. That's a $2,200 value. And then we added guillotine style leagues this year as well, just a couple weeks ago, in fact. Chop leagues, check them out. $35 is where they start. You win those leagues, you can win your way into the main event or to the Big Gorilla. That's all at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on the video, share it with your friends, share it with your enemies, and click that notification bell so you know every time we go live, which I think this is the last show will be live this week, but we do have another show tomorrow that'll be recorded. I'll tell you about that coming up later on in the show, if I remember, which I should. All right, without further ado, let's bring in tonight's guest co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, you know his work from being a senior film analyst over at our good friends at Fantasy Points. You can check him out on X at callmesteve07. Please welcome into the program, Mr. Steve O'Rourke. Steve, what's going on, man? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Eric. Good to be here. I'm excited.
So I'm going to start off on like a weird note. You're familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Marvel Comics, what have you?
Very much so.
Okay. So this is why I want to set this up, because I think Fantasy Points is great for both film process and data sources, right? Like there's a good medley there. So if there was an Avengers style Civil War, would it be you and Brett Whitefield leading the charge against Scott Barrett and everybody else over at Fantasy Points? Do I have that down pat?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to frame it. That's usually, it really is. Scott will put up a fight on his side, but Brett and I really hammer down on the film, and we really rest our laurels on that. We're both data guys too, but I mean, I think for both of us, and I mean, especially myself, I kind of lean film oriented over data oriented. So yeah, I would say that Brett's the Captain America and I'm the Falcon to Scott Barrett's Iron Man.
That's good. That's good stuff. I like it. So that's what I want to get into, because to kick things off right away, so all the viewers know exactly what you're doing. You are a senior film analyst. Brett Whitefield, I know you know this, and he's mentioned it on a couple of podcasts before. He calls you his protege. So you're like basically working under him, but I'm sure that you guys are learning for each other as well, from each other as well. Tell us how you got hooked up with Fantasy Points and what you're doing for that organization.
Yeah, so it all started, honestly, that I want to say it was 2021. I had just gotten let go from a sales job, and I was doing just odd jobs around Boston at the time. And I was perusing Twitter one day, and Brett had put out a tweet that just said, anybody who wants to work in football, DM me. And I was like, well, I want to work in football. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing much else right now. So I DM'd him, and then I started out as a low level part-time charter and basically realized that I loved it. And I was like, I'm just going to sit in Brett's hip pocket until he hires me full time. And so at the time we were working with a different company, came over to Fantasy Points about a year later. And then, yeah, I just basically hitched myself to his wagon and stayed in his ear constantly, probably to the point where he got annoyed of me at times. Was like, how do I want to do this full time? I want to do this full time. And, just slowly like built up my repertoire as a charter. And then where I really I'd like to believe made my name with Fantasy Points is that I was one of one of really the big people, film analysts behind our separation score stuff. So I did a large bulk of that, like groundwork of going back and charting like 2022, 2023, 2024, and getting us ready to launch that. And, so that's kind of like that's like my baby a little bit. And so that was really where I made my name with them. And then once that kind of hit the ground running, and then I, got in with Scott and Joe and all those guys. And, now I couldn't imagine doing anything else really.
It's a cool story, for sure. Now, when you are watching film, um, uh, um, specifically skill position guys like quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, I know there are different things that you're looking for dependent upon the position. But for anybody out there who is wondering how the sausage is made, can you tell us? And you don't have to get too inside baseball in this, but can you tell us when you're watching film specifically what you're looking for when you're evaluating a quarterback, a running back, a receiver, a tight end?
Well, big thing with like receivers is just that understanding that there's a lot of nuance that goes into route running. It that goes without saying, but like just knowing that a lot of guys do things differently and that speed isn't everything. And, it really comes down to just a guy's ability to accelerate and decelerate. Their ability to manipulate speed is so much greater than like overall top speed. Obviously, overall top speed plays a huge part in the game, but it's the guys that can go in and manipulate their speed and keep defenders off track that makes a guy a good separator. And usually what we've seen with a lot of our data is that the correlation between guys being able to separate should lead to more targets and more yards in the receiving game. And running backs, I'm a big vision guy. I really focus on running backs that can see holes that aren't there, see holes that are there. And that's a big differentiator for that. And then quarterback's not necessarily my strong suit. I will say that is still something that I'm working up to and getting to, but that is, have learned a lot from Brett. And a lot of that just comes from like footwork, posture of the quarterback and things like that. That's what I focus a lot on, but really receivers is where I spend a ton of time in. And it's just like being able to see guys that can, work at 3-4 different speeds and who understand how to use leverage, how to find a corner's blind spot. Like that's a huge thing that I think you can pretty much see well when you see a receiver is just how do they climb into a corner's blind spot to then, execute their break in a way that gets them open. A lot of times it's why like Mike Evans has been so good in our average separation score for the last like couple of years. Is just he's one of the best in the game at top of the route, getting in corners blind spots, and then using his length and extending his arms without drawing or without forcing a pass interference, but using it to keep defenders off track. So speed manipulation, I think, is a massive differentiator in the game.
When you, and maybe this is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask you anyway, because plenty of people call me stupid. When you're talking about a corner's blind spot, is that the spot where the receiver disappears from the corner's peripheral vision?
Basically, it's just, generally when a corner, whether if they're playing zone, generally a corner is going to be facing towards the quarterback. They're watching quarterback's eyes. If they're playing man, they've got eyes on their receiver. So it's just about being able to get essentially where the receiver is behind the corner, and is then able to, once they get behind the corner in the sense that, like behind his back, it then becomes a free game of like, he can go wherever he wants. Zone, it's a little bit different because obviously you have, safeties over the top, guys underneath, but like, especially with man coverage, if he can, get the corner to flip his hips, force the corner to flip his hips, essentially, that makes the corner make a decision before the receiver has to make a decision. And that's where a lot of receivers win, is where they're able to force the corner into, like, basically declaring that, hey, they're running deep, or they're trying to pull up on a hitch route. And that's, if they can force that before they get into their break, that's where a lot of receivers win well.
It's fascinating stuff. I feel like I'm learning so much. I could talk about this all night, but I know the viewers do want to get some fantasy football, and I know it's great. It's good stuff. I want to let everybody know tonight that Steve and I are going to be going around the NFL telling you about the latest news in the league, and there has been a bunch. As much as people say this is the dead time in fantasy football, there's still plenty going on. We'll get into that. And then the final segment, I know you were at the Senior Bowl this year, Steve.
Yes.
I want to kind of, if we could go back to that, there's a handful of names I want to bring up that I know you wrote about. I want to talk about some of those players, what you remember seeing them back then, and sort of like what your attitude is towards them now that we know landing spots. People are kind of getting deeper and deeper into their FFPC rookie drafts. None of these guys that we have on the list are first-round picks. So hopefully we'll help some people out tonight before we sign off at 9 o'clock. Okay, let's get into it, Steve. And we'll kick things off in Pittsburgh. The player, the story of this player will never die. Aaron Rodgers. What else is there to talk about in May? The latest we have on him, and I don't want to dwell too much on the news. I want to get more of your thoughts with Aaron Rodgers and who he's throwing to this year. But we have Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network coming out and posting on X today. I believe he posted on X. That Rodgers is meeting with the Steelers for, quote, further discussion. Rappaport also saying it is likely that Aaron Rodgers will be a Pittsburgh Steeler for 2026. Adam Crowley from 93.7 The Fan originally had this report. Rodgers was in Pittsburgh, or is expected to be in Pittsburgh tonight, and he might sign this weekend, which would be really good for the Steelers and Rodgers because they kind of know what they're in for, and the mutual commitment is there. It's a little bit different though, Steve, for Rodgers and the Steelers this year. Gone is Mike Tomlin. Enter Mike McCarthy. You also have Rico Dowdle in the backfield. You also have Michael Pittman, and they just soaked a second-round pick into Jeremy Bernard. I want to get your take on the biggest difference and how much, if at all, should we be bumping up these Pittsburgh Steelers, knowing that not only do they have Aaron Rodgers back, or expected to have Aaron Rodgers back, but the weapons, Steve, a little bit of an upgrade here in Pittsburgh. Does it get you excited about any of these players in Steel City?
The guy, I thought Jeremy Bernard was a fun draft pick. I think of the teams that he could go to and of the quarterbacks he could work with, Aaron Rodgers is one that I think is able to utilize his ability to win over the middle and his ability to kind of do dirty work, in screen game, in run blocking, things like that. But the biggest, I think, beneficiary of this is going to be Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman is built to be an Aaron Rodgers receiver. Mm-hmm. Michael Pittman, he wins a lot in the short area. He's one of the better separators when it comes to slant routes and underneath routes. And so I think what we'll see is kind of almost a come down for DK. I think DK still has that ability to win the back shoulder fades, the deep throws that Aaron Rodgers loves to throw, but Pittman will be the guy that I think will become a kind of a target hog for Pittsburgh. Overall, I'm not that high on Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I think last year him having, a 6.2 ADOT, and with that ADOT, it's still being negative 0.6% on completion percentage over expected and just 6.67 yards per attempt. I know McCarthy coming in, it's familiarity. It'll be good in that sense, but I think that Rodgers just drives the ship of that offense. And he's done that for many years. And I just don't know how high that ceiling is. I think the floor is solid. This is still going to be a typical Pittsburgh Steelers 9-8 team, but I just overall I can't buy into Aaron Rodgers taking a different step this year. Mm-hmm. I just think from what we saw with the Jets and what we saw last year with the Steelers, I think you'll get more 3 wide receiver sets. I think you'll see a little bit of move away from a lot of the like super heavy, like multiple tight end, bury it into a lot of RPOs. I think they'll spread it out a little bit more, but I just don't know what the overall ceiling for that offense is. But I will say that if you're doing a PPR, I like Michael Pittman because I think that he'll be the guy that that Rodgers looks to often as his like as his safety valve. He's kind of had that throughout the years with like Devontae Adams. Even go back to all of his Green Bay years, and he's had those guys that he relies on in the RPO in the short game. And I think Michael Pittman will be that guy. But overall, as as a team, as an offense, I think the ceiling is still pretty set at kind of where it's at. His average yards per game might jump up to like 220 yards as opposed to like hovering around 200 last year. But I think we know what we have with Aaron Rodgers, and it's a guy who wants to run his own offense, and he's going to do it his way. And that's that.
Michael Pittman right now, Steve, according to fantasymojo.com ADP in the FFPC Big Gorilla over the last week and a half, Pittman has an ADP of wide receiver 44. He is going in the mid-9th round. Why is this interesting? Because you look at some of these other guys that are going right around him as far as receivers go, and there's some warts there. Romeo Doubs, he could be joined on that team by A.J. Brown shortly. Casey Concepcion has to deal with Denzel Boston also joining this team. And we'll talk about Jerry Jeudy in a little bit, but suddenly he's a thing again, potentially. Jordan Addison, obviously the second banana in Minnesota next to Justin Jefferson. Those are guys going right after him. And even the guys right before him, Wan'Dale Robinson. He's got to contend with Carnell Tate. He's got to contend with Gunnar Helm. He's got to contend with the two guys from last year, DK and Iamaner, and then you look at Calvin Ridley on that team too. Ricky Pearsall right above him, and Jacoby Myers is another guy who's going right above Pittman. And Myers is interesting because, and perhaps I'm burying the lead on this, Steve, but we got some big news out of Jacksonville over the last 24 hours from both Liam Cohen and James Gladstone, the GM there. Gladstone specifically was on the Rich Eisen show yesterday and said that Hunter is, quote, set to play both sides of the ball in 2026. Now, there's some caveats with this. Gladstone said that he thinks the usage on the defensive side of the football is going to go up compared to where it was last year. They mentioned losing Greg Newsome and how Hunter is going to be needed a lot more at corner when you consider the receiver room is pretty deep with Parker Washington, the aforementioned Myers, and then Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah.
Hunter played 324 offensive snaps last year. He played 164 on defense. So that was a total of, 490 roughly. And that was after, obviously he missed the rest of the season just when it seemed like he was coming on. So it would have been very interesting to see how those snaps would have gone the remainder of the year. Maybe they just would have continued at that pace for both of them. I don't know. But Hunter had 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. This was right after the team was really talking him up as a receiver. And I think a lot of people, when we found out sort of this throwaway comment that came from Gladstone in January, and then the Jaguars coaches and GM, they didn't have to talk to anybody. So we kind of just sat and chewed on this comment that he's going to be playing so much defense and that he's going to be a primary corner this year. And we saw some crazy trades go down in FFPC Dynasty. We saw some crazy drops in ADP for Travis Hunter. I don't know if it's going to rebound to the levels they were at before, but they certainly will rebound a little bit. Travis Hunter owners in FFPC Dynasty leagues are probably pretty happy at this news. Maybe this gives them more hope that this guy's going to contribute as a wide receiver this year. Maybe it gives them that opportunity to trade him for 85, maybe 90 cents on the dollar and just get out of the Travis Hunter business because it is a little bit nebulous. We don't know exactly how much he's going to be playing offense versus defense this year. I want to get your take based on what we have seen and heard from both Gladstone and Cohen over the last 24 hours. Do you imagine that it's going to be a split similar to last year? Or are we going to see more of a half and half split between offense and defense? Or is it going to be a lot more defense than offense? I don't know what to make of it. And certainly if the Jaguars know, they're not really letting us on. They're not. And why would they? There's no reason for them to be totally clear and transparent about what their plans are for Hunter. But if you were playing in a dynasty league or drafting in a best ball league right now, how would you be handling Travis Hunter?
I think Travis Hunter belongs on defense more than he belongs on offense. I think his play as a corner is much more valuable to a team than his play as a receiver. That's not knocking him as a receiver. That's just, I think that's more of a compliment to what he provides as a corner than anything else. Now, what I will say, it's funny that, after all of this discourse of the last couple months, we ended up right back kind of where we were at the end of the season, where it was like, okay, Hunter's going to play a decent amount of offense, but he's going to play mostly defense. I would kind of treat him pretty similarly. I think for me, I would hang on to Hunter and see what happens this year, because I think the acquisition of Myers, the uptick with Washington kind of coming on later in the year, and what I think will probably be a bounce back from Brian Thomas Jr. This year is that I think you're going to see that he's going to be out on offense more as like a surplus and more as a not necessarily design target, but that his target value will be much higher, just because it's no longer like out of necessity. It's out of like, hey, we have this weapon and we're going to use him. So I'm holding Hunter right now just to see what happens this year, because I think he did start to come on as a receiver. His separation ability and just overall ability as a receiver started to come on a little bit later in the year. And, unfortunately with the injury, we lost the ability to see what happens with that. But I kind of think that Jacksonville's going to I think it's going to end up being the same as it was last year. I think that we all had that freak out of, oh my gosh, they're not going to play him on offense at all. It's over. What did we do? We wasted first round picks in the rookie draft. Yeah. This is the worst thing ever. The kid's an athlete, and Jacksonville recognizes that. I think he's gonna be a full-time defensive starter, but I think he's shown throughout his college career, and I think he can show himself in the NFL that he deserves to be on the field on offense. And I think that you'll see, I would wager that he will probably leak into like what Parker Washington, Jacoby Myers. I think he'll be using the slot a little bit more. I think he's still valuable as an asset in Dynasty. And I think that like if it craters this year and they end up playing him like 5 snaps a game, it is what it is. But like I am too high on an athlete like that, and I'm too high on what he can bring to the table to like let him go and miss out on what could happen with him. But I'm also a guy that I am a big potential guy. It's burned me times before, and I'm willing to be burned again. But I think that he is just too good of a football player to not warrant being on the field consistently on offense.
We have ADP on Travis Hunter, and it's a little bit dated because, and I know it's like these comments just came out within the last 24 hours. So the draft rooms haven't totally reacted to it yet so far, but I can tell you that he was a 17th round pick on average over the last week and a half in the Big Gorilla. However, I can tell you that within the last 24 hours, he was taken as high as the 13th round. So he is climbing, and I would expect that ADP to climb more. We cling on to the last thing that we know, the last thing we see, the last thing we hear. And I think that was a big reason why Hunter fell in his ADP. And now if these guys, if Cohen and Gladstone are not talking until like OTAs or training camp or whatever it is, now we could see the opposite where the rebound hits and he goes a little bit higher than he should. I don't know. Tom Smith saying he's not going to have him anywhere this year. So I think, that if there is one player that's going to be the roller coaster of ADPs this summer until we get to training camp, it's Travis Hunter, because that guy can go anywhere. The thing is, like, you have to go get your guy. If you like Travis Hunter, you have to go out and get him, because you don't know what other people in your league are capable of, and you don't know how high they're going to be taking him. But certainly his ADP and his value looks significantly better than it did 2 days ago. Okay, moving on. I don't know what to make of this report, Steve, as we get into New York Jets talk. Rich Simony, who covers the Jets for ESPN, said that or reported that Frank Reich, the new offensive coordinator for the Jets, said that Geno Smith is the perfect fit for his offense. Now, I don't know if and Reich also did say that he thinks Geno Smith's best football is in front of him, which That is certainly a statement. I don't know if this makes – I don't know who looks worse in this. Geno Smith, Frank Reich, Aaron Glenn, the New York Jets. It's so awful to see something like this. So I want to get your thought on this Jets offense, which I do think it has to be better than what it was last year. But the impact of Frank Reich, who I don't think was the Jets' first choice as offensive coordinator, coming in to lead this offense with Geno Smith. Certainly you like Garrett Wilson, you like Breece Hall. They added Kenyon Sadiq, they added Omar Cooper. This is not as toothless of an offense as we saw down the stretch last year. By the way, they got Braylon Allen back too, who got hurt early on in the season last year. But this Jets offense with Geno Smith, do you want to be in business with any of those players that I mentioned for fantasy this year? Sometimes bad players on good offenses can still be good fantasy investments. It's just difficult to figure out who they are going to be. Who are they going to be for you on this team, if any, Steve?
I will say that I am not as low on Geno. Like, how do I put this? People were really propping him up after his 2024 season in Seattle. There was the whole discourse a lot in Twitter, especially with like film versus data guys. There was the like Geno should be a top 10 quarterback. And then last year happened. Now, I think I kind of am in the camp of like, I think you take whatever you saw of Geno last year, throw it out, because whatever was happening in Las Vegas last year with that offensive line, whatever you want to call his collection of receivers that he was working with there, that hasn't really improved since he left. But, you know, even then it wasn't this stable of weapons that he was throwing to. I think Geno is a competent NFL quarterback. I think he's a, higher than 25 quarterback. And I think that behind a competent offensive line with this set of weapons, which I kind of think can be underrated. I really like Garrett Wilson. I think Omar Cooper can provide value. I'll never give up on A.D. Mitchell. Kenyon Sadiq offers a weapon. They even have Mason Taylor over there. So like, I think that Geno can have a bounce back year. And I think that you'll see the Jets be a much better team. Now, much better, meaning like, hey, they might get up to like 7-8 wins. But I think Geno can lead a middle of the road offense. I think that if you can get Garrett Wilson at a discount, I don't know what his ADP is right now, but getting him like middle rounds and being able to grab that, Omar Cooper at the back end of things, Kenyon Sadiq, his value might prop up a little bit too much for me, but I really do think that like Geno with good receivers can be a really good quarterback. I mean, he was one of the top quarterbacks when it came to hero throws when he was in Seattle. He's not afraid to let it deep. And so much of what we saw with the Jets offense last year was just so neutered by the quarterback play and quarterback play and just the team in general. And I think the team talent level has gone up. I think Geno, I don't think his best football is necessarily ahead of him, but I do think that you could get like a, 17, 16, 17, QB 16, 17 out of Geno and have he could have a mid to high 3,000 yard throwing season, and it brings Garrett Wilson back to being a 1,000-yard receiver. So like, I know people are really ready to bury Geno, and I don't necessarily blame him because last year in Las Vegas was an absolute travesty, but I think that was more a product of the system, a product of the offensive line, a product of the dysfunction than it was Geno being a garbage quarterback.
Yeah, and you're probably right. I mean, it's never just one thing, right? It's always a combination of things. By the way, Garrett Wilson, just as long as we're talking about it, wide receiver 15 at the 401 for his ADP over the last week and a half. That's right behind Teteroa McMillan. It's right ahead of Devonta Smith, although I do think Smith probably catches Wilson here within the next month or so, probably before June 1st when the purported trade is going to happen between the Eagles and Patriots. If it does happen, which I assume it will, but you never take anything for granted in the NFL nowadays. The Houston Texans, were in the news, specifically CJ Stroud was in the news. DJ Bieniemy, who covers the Texans for ESPN.com, had a story that he wrote about Stroud changing his off-season diet, that he has cut out all sugar. He's had nothing but water and lean food. I don't know what lean. I mean, I know lean protein. I didn't realize there's like lean food out there, or maybe it's just eating less. I'm not really sure what to think about it. But Bieniemy said to expect a slimmer Stroud once he gets to Houston and gets the Texans geared up for another playoff run in 2026. We hear stuff like this. This is a little bit too early for it, but we hear stuff like this all the time. Always, he's lost a lot of weight. He's gained a lot of muscle. He's in the best shape of his life. Blah, 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 blah. It goes on. I don't know how much stock you put into this. And certainly I think the Texans win with David Montgomery, that offensive line, and their defense much more so than CJ Stroud. But they do have some playmakers on this team, Higgins and Collins, that might get Tank Dell back as well. I don't know if CJ Stroud becomes like a top 15 option this year. But specifically this new diet, does that impact you at all in what you think Stroud is going to be able or not be able to do in 2026?
It doesn't really impact much for me. This is the Lamar Jackson storyline that we had the last, like, feels like perennially for the last like 3-4 years of, hey, he gained weight, he lost weight, he's going to run more, he's going to run less, all that whole thing. It doesn't really change much for me. I like the Texans offense. I really like Nico Collins. I think Higgins is on his way up. I think adding Montgomery is going to add an element to this Houston offense that they direly missed without Joe Mixon last year. And so I think, like you said, he might be a mid-teens quarterback. I don't think he's changing his game much. I think he kind of is who he is. And as long as that offensive line is even just a tick better, like he can be a solid quarterback. And I think Nico Collins, if he stays healthy, he's going to continually be like one of the best receivers in the game, because whenever he's healthy, he takes a leap. Like he looks a little bit better every single year since he's come into the NFL. And in my opinion, just as like a pure receiver, I think he's top 10 in the NFL right now. So him changing his diet, I hope it leads to him having a longer career, and I hope he feels better, but it doesn't really make me jump for joy or like have me going like, well, here we go, CJ Stroud, top 5 quarterback, let's go.
Listen, we're in May. I mean, this is the stuff that's coming up. I'm with you, by the way, on this. And we're going to deal with more of this in June and July too, before we actually get to real football talk. But I thought it was worth bringing up, especially considering the way that the Texans have sort of remade their offensive identity to a certain extent with their personnel changes this offseason. Let's go to Dejon Stribling. It's as wild as this is. I've done, I don't know how many shows since the NFL draft. I don't know if I brought up Stribling once, and I feel like it's important to talk about here. Tariq Ahmad, who is the VP of player personnel for the Niners, said that they drafted Stribling with the first pick in the second round of the draft, largely because he's a really tough player and he's got a really good work ethic. The quote here from Ahmad: "Our coach loved him right away. Leadership, goal-oriented, the passion that this guy has, the work ethic, the toughness, the durability. He checks all those boxes at a high level." Now, this is also a player that is entering, I think he'll be 24 before the season's over. His rookie season's over. 811 yards on 6 touchdowns this past year. Could that be because he's beating up on 19-year-old corners and 20-year-old corners? Possibly. Possibly not. I would be normally more accepting of this choice, but Steve, the Niners' track record of drafting skill position guys on day 2 of the draft, it's not great. And it's really difficult to give Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and the Niners decision makers here the benefit of the doubt when so many of these guys have been misses. I am out on Stribling this year. The only reason I would consider taking him in a rookie draft is if he does slide, and because of the draft capital that he got, even though it's the Niners, I think we have to respect it at the same point. Your thoughts on Stribling, what you know about him, and what you think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be much as a rookie, but sort of like what you think his dynasty impact's going to be.
Yeah, so he was an interesting player to watch. I thought why I think that San Fran went this direction, why they pulled him so early is really that I think they have to really like what he provides in the run game. He is one of the best run blocking receivers, and a lot of what he did at Ole Miss, he was consistently used as like either in the backfield as a kick out blocker. He would be used as a split blocker sometimes, and they would use him tight to formation. So I think that they probably liked him because he offers a little bit more versatility as in the run game and in their formational work, that they can kind of line him up similar to a tight end almost, and use him as a blocker while still maintaining a little bit more of like three wide receiver sets and getting into that. He was really good against press coverage. That was one of the things that like jumped out. He's an insane athlete. He's really fast. He's really strong. He's really hard to knock off his stem. And when he got up against press, he did well. That was where a lot of his yards came up. When the corner was like 1 to 2 yards up on him, he had good feet, was able to move off the line really quickly and create separation down the field. So like that, I think he provides some value there. Now, a lot of what I didn't like about him was his route running and his ability against off coverage, which is going to happen more often than not in the NFL. But I think there's room for growth there because of what he provides as an athlete. I agree with you. I don't think that there's going to be a ton of like target usage as a rookie. I think he'll get used a decent amount because of what he provides in the run game and what he provides as a run blocker. But I think that he has the potential to grow if he can work on the way he stems his routes against off coverage and the way he works against corners when they have cushion against him. So he might see I bet you he sees like a decent amount of deep balls. He might catch the stray long touchdown here or there because of his ability to work against press when that comes up. But I really think that San Fran went after him because of what he can provide in the run game and what he can provide in like a formational versatility and just personnel versatility for that offense of maintaining somewhat heavier sets while being a little bit lighter.
I happen to agree with you on the whole run game blocking aspect. I think that makes perfect sense. What does that say, though? I mean, are they also, by this Stribling pick, are they also making a comment on Ricky Pearsall? Because they have Evans, who's more of like a Band-Aid type guy. I don't know if they can expect more than a year, maybe even, 2 years tops from him, I would think.
Yeah.
And then Christian Kirk, he's a total Band-Aid, and I don't think he's going to be very impactful at all for fantasy, at least for managed leagues this year. And then it's Pearsall. And if Stribling is brought in, which I agree with you, primarily for what he's able to do with his perimeter blocking, doesn't this say that the Niners have a lot of faith in Ricky Pearsall, who has, like, Pearsall's kind of let us down, fantasy wise. And I know people were hoping for a big year from him, but now with Evans there and with Stribling being added, I wonder if the long-term look for Pearsall is going to be pretty good in San Francisco, given that he's going to be the primary pass catcher when Evans does move on. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I do think that Stribling pick was as much about Pearsall as it was about anybody on that roster, including Stribling.
Yeah, I do think that this is a testament to that they think that Pearsall will take the next step. He was hampered by injuries last year. He was hampered by injuries his rookie year. I think that they're banking on the Pearsall being able to be healthy. When he was healthy and when he was operating at full strength, he looked good. He had good numbers. He separated really, really well. That was one of the things that kept jumping out to me and to a couple other guys in fantasy points, was just his ability to separate especially out of the slot. I think that, this is going to be a push toward trying to get him more involved in the offense, try to get him to be, an upper 80s, 90s target guy, as opposed to this very sporadic kind of thing that it was. And I see someone had mentioned like having targets to fill from Jennings. And I think that what Jennings provided in the run game, that's where Stribling comes in. And I think that, Pearsall starts to get a lot of more of those slot reps and more of those slot targets from Purdy this year. And he becomes a more integral part of that offense.
Yeah, I know. Scott Kobe chimed in saying that he's worried about the Niners offense this year. And certainly I think you can make that case. McCaffrey is coming off, just another massive workload year. He's another year older. Pearsall has struggled to stay on the field. Evans had some soft tissue problems last year as well, if I remember correctly. It was a collarbone, I think, that knocked him out most of the year, but he did have some soft tissue stuff as well. You have George Kittle. We don't know how he's going to recover from that Achilles. And we could see, based on how Brock Purdy finished the season, we just could see some natural regression coming from him. So now the good thing about the Niners is they're going to be working with a third place schedule, and they're not a third place team. They just happen to be in a really good division. So they'll have that working for them as well. But I think following Pearsall in drafts this summer, it's going to be fun. It's one of the many wide receivers that we are paying attention to right now as far as fantasy drafts go, that there's not a whole lot of news going on, but sometimes you'll find a receiver who is not the highest drafted guy, the lowest drafted guy, is kind of in the middle. And sometimes a piece of news can change the way that we perceive him in drafts. And that one player this week, if anybody, was probably Stephon Diggs, found not guilty of assault on Tuesday. He was facing assault charges from a private chef, that there was a pay dispute. I don't want to get into the legalese of it, but basically he's not guilty. Now, I think there's a lot of people out there that believe, and I'm not saying they're wrong, that believe that the thing that was holding Diggs back from signing was this sort of legal thing hanging over his head. The NFL could still weigh in on this. The NFL could still suspend him based on their, the personal conduct policy or whatever it is. They could choose to do that. And, the other thing, Steve, is he wasn't really coming off like an unbelievably successful year. He was all right for New England last year, but again, he's on the wrong side of 30. He's a player with some mileage on him as well. This will be his 12th year in the league, 85 catches, 1,000 yards, and 4 touchdowns. In drafts right now, and this is how I'm sure this is going to help decide how you answer this question. Wide receiver 59 at the 1407. So he's being drafted as like a wide receiver 5, essentially. Does that price still make sense to you right now? How high is too high for Diggs? And is this a guy that you want to be in business with, knowing that he's not in business with the NFL right now, still remaining a free agent?
Yeah. And like you said, I don't really want to necessarily comment. It sounds like I would be surprised if the NFL came down with anything based on what I heard happened in the case. I'd be surprised if the NFL punished him for anything. I think he's a good back end of the draft. Like, he'll be a real dependent on like landing spot. Like, if he were to go to a team like, I don't know, say the Raiders, I probably would pull myself out on that. But I think he's worthy of like getting as a back end roster spot and like redraft stuff. I think that he still can work really well out of the slot. He's a savvy route runner. He's one of those guys that his game is aging well, and it will continue to age well. And yeah, I do think it's going to be really dependent on where he lands, like Scott said. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how where he goes, because I think that he can provide like very good short area, very good up the seam, over the middle type stuff. But I think that he's gone are the days of him being a 120 plus target, over 1,000 yards. I think you're probably looking at a guy that can hopefully provide right around 600 to 800 yards this year, depending if he lands in a decent spot. But I wouldn't be surprised if like the Raiders went after him and went to sign him to kind of add like a safety blanket for someone like for Fernando Mendoza, who, like I said, if you look at that Raiders receivers, it's destitute.
It's the Raiders, it's the Dolphins, it's the Commanders to a certain extent. I think you could throw the Falcons into that mix as well. There are receivers that need homes, and I think there are some homes for those receivers on those teams. We talked about Deebo Samuel still out there, Keenan Allen, Diggs, obviously. I feel like Tyreek Hill is another one. Although I'm kind of down on him. I don't know how healthy he's going to be this season. Yeah. A guy who relies so much on that twitchiness and that speed. I just don't know if he can come back and be a successful fantasy player. this season, at least. The other thing with Diggs too is, you think about best ball versus managed leagues. Diggs to me was always a great managed league guy because he was pretty consistent. You knew what you were going to get from him. I don't think the spike weeks are there for Diggs. So like in best ball, I'm not very interested in him there, even regardless of landing spot.
I agree with you there. I think that no matter where he goes, he's a guy that will probably pretty consistently provide you something around like the, 5 receptions, 50, 60 yards. That's probably his baseline, but his baseline is probably also kind of his ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Tucker Kraft, we got some news on him this week too, Steve. Pro Football Talk had this piece. I don't know which channel he was on Sirius XM, but Brian Gutekunst, the GM for the Packers, said that he expects Micah Parsons and Tucker Kraft back early in the season. I think this is interesting with Kraft because he's a guy that's kind of slowly creeping up draft boards right now with more and more positivity coming from that ACL tear. He is now a tight end 7 in the Big Gorilla. People, again, tight end premium stuff for the FFPC. So you're looking at him going as a 5th round pick right now, end of the 5th. He's moved ahead of Laporta. He's comfortably ahead of Aronde Gadsden, and he's only about a half round behind Kyle Pitts right now. The other thing, and I've been bringing this up too, Steve, and I know you're a Lions guy, right?
I am.
So the NFC North pretty good. That Packers passing game this year, what was the biggest thing? We always had the problem with it over the years. Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur, they love to spray the ball around. Like there's not like a really consistent go-to guy on that team or even go-to guys. And now Dontavian Wicks is in Philadelphia. Luke Musgrave is basically a non-factor. He has been most of his career. And Romeo Doubs is in New England. So now this passing offense has come down to Kraft, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, who didn't really show anything last year until the very end, which some rookie receivers, that's sort of their way, that they show at the end of their rookie season. But this is more of a concentrated passing offense. So while I was thinking this whole offseason, Watson did most of his damage when Kraft was hurt. And Kraft did most of his damage when Watson was recovering from an injury. How are these guys going to coexist? Well, maybe the answer is no Dobbs, no Wicks, no problem for these guys, both being successful players this year with Kraft and Watson. I got to tell you, I'm more willing to draft these players this year than I was last year. Is that the right approach to have for this quasi new look Packers passing game?
I think Tucker Kraft is like the consistent guy in Green Bay. Like out of it, I agree that it probably continues to be kind of a scatter shot of with their receivers. You'll have the guy like I think Matthew Golden comes out a little bit better this year. I think he's a good receiver. I think he showed his ability to be healthy or his ability to separate, and like I think he'll provide value. But I think you're going to see the kind of spike weeks sporadic with a lot of the receivers. But I think Tucker Kraft is the consistency for that Packers offense. I mean, even if you just look at the stats for Jordan Love pre-Kraft injury, post-Kraft injury, he was sitting at like 8.28 yards per attempt, which is 3rd in the NFL when Kraft was there. And then Kraft left and he was sitting at 6.93 yards per attempt. And, he was averaging 258 yards per passing per game. When Kraft was out, that dropped down to like 207 without Kraft. I think Kraft is the straw that stirs the drink of that Green Bay passing offense. So I'm totally in on Kraft. I think that as long as the reports continue to be good, that he's recovering well from that ACL, he's all the way in because I think, especially with the kind of scarcity in like big weeks from tight ends, he's that guy that I think will come back and provide those big weeks at the tight end position. I just think that the Packers want to kind of operate their offense, run their pass offense through Kraft and have the other guys be like the deep threats, big intermediate deep route stuff that Watson provides, Golden provides, and then having a lot of Jaden Reed and Kraft underneath as like the, keep the offense on task. And Kraft has the ability to break off big catches. I just think that like he's going to be valuable, and I think he's going to bounce right back to where he was. And I think he's worthy of being like a top 5 tight end because it's just, I mean, it really comes down to like hearing the news of how that ACL continues to recover. But if everything's on pace, I think it's right back to where it was before he got hurt.
think Bob Harris from Football Guys pointed this out that Watson missed, I believe, 294 days from the time he tore the ACL to the time he was back on the field. And if you go back, and obviously it's a fun exercise more than a scientific thing because everybody's body heals differently and not all ACL tears are created equal. But if you go to the 294th day after Tucker Kraft tore his ACL against Carolina last year, I think week 8, it would take him into like early August or mid-August, right? So then that's when training camp's going on. So again, week 1, I think is probably not going to happen. The Packers usually are pretty cautious. Their medical team is cautious. But yeah, I mean, October, I would think he'd be back. The question for me is how effective is he going to be in that first year coming off the ACL, right? Like, because we have seen that sometimes it takes a little bit longer to recover. I'm hopeful. I mean, you don't even know this about me, maybe you do, but I'm in Northeast Wisconsin, so I'm a Packers guy. So I'm hopeful that Kraft like comes back and starts wrecking it again, but I don't know. I mean, these are funny things, Steve. They're very funny things. Let me ask you this, because I think I put it on the thumbnail and I didn't even put it on the rundown. I was a big Sam Laporta guy, but the weird back injury that happened last year, where we didn't even know he was hurt, then he was hurt, then he was on IR, then all of a sudden Campbell said he's probably not going to play again this season. That was weird to me. It doesn't seem like a whole lot of people are talking about it. I mentioned that he's going as tight end 8 right now, so not a lot of concern amongst FFPC drafters about this back issue. Haven't heard a whole lot about it. I guess what I have heard has been good. But you're a Lions guy. You tell me. I mean, what should my concern level be about Sam Laporta's back? Forget St. Brown and Jameson Williams and everybody else and Jahmyr Gibbs on that team that he's competing for targets with. Let's just specifically talk about the back and what I should know about it before I'm clicking on him in my leagues this year.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting because I think from what it sounded like, he was kind of dealing with a like sciatic nerve thing. And I've been lucky enough to deal with that myself. And it's a finicky thing. I'm nervous. I'm nervous because like that can pop up and at any time. And I'm hopeful that he bounces back healthy, but I'm nervous that this could be a recurrent issue. I'm nervous that this could be something that kind of doesn't maybe necessarily have the severity that it did the first time, but it's something that could potentially pop up periodically throughout his career, throughout this year. That is something that I am like nervous about, because I mean, back injuries in and of themselves are dangerous and like scary, but like that specific dealing with that can really kind of derail a person, and it really can be tough to bounce back. And it's not always a linear healing process. It can be something that flares up, comes down, flares up. So it'll be interesting to see, but I am a little bit nervous about Laporta and like longevity and just his consistency to be able to stay on the field.
I think this is important because, and I made this comment on a show a few weeks ago, and this is more connecting the dots and speculating rather than knowing anything, which is pretty much what I do all the time. But if Laporta were to miss time, wouldn't it make sense to you, not only as a fantasy analyst, but as a Lions fan, wouldn't it make more sense to you that is the freeway on-ramp that Isaac Tesla needs, rather than the Lions trying to, pump in Brock Wright or Tyler Conklin or whoever? I mean, to me, if Laporta were to miss time, I would think that the Lions would tweak it so Tesla gets on the field a lot more rather than, one of these backup tight ends.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Tesla can win in similar areas that Laporta can win in, and with his hands that he's shown. I mean, like what I think, like he had less than 20 catches last year, and most of them felt like they were highlight catches. I think that sure-handedness is something that I think will be more often used if Laporta is not there, as someone that they can use a little bit over the middle, a little bit up the field, downfield throws. But yeah, I would be, if Laporta's out, it would not be a, hey, let's, jump right into whoever the backup tight end. It would be more so of like looking at a Tesla, or even like another, someone like, they drafted Kendrick Law, that he'd be an interesting guy that they might use a little bit more at. And in the offense without Laporta. I don't think it's a situation where they're just going to funnel targets to the next guy down the line, because that's not really the skill set that Brock Ryder, Conklin really provide. So yeah, I agree with that.
I just think of all that athleticism they could have on the field at once with Tesla, Williams, St. Brown, and Gibbs. I mean, holy cow. How do you stop that if you're a defensive coordinator? I think the Lions have a nice little bounce back season offensively for sure, maybe defensively as well.
And with a fourth place schedule.
And the fourth place schedule. That is underrated.
Right. Right now it's slated as the, obviously it's based off last year, and last year means nothing, but it is the easiest schedule in the NFL right now. So there's something to be said there too.
And I know they are. I think most sports books have them as the favorites to win that division, which is crazy. That's got to be the only division in pro football like that, where they have the last place finisher from last year being the favorite to win the division this year. That's why we love the NFL, man. There's a conversation going on in the YouTube chat, and I don't want to give it short shrift. But I know Chris Lude and Steve Yurgalis were talking about the Niners tight end situation. And I want to get your thoughts on how much time Theo Greminger, your colleague over at Fantasy Points, has said on more than one occasion. And he's not saying he thinks this is going to happen, but I do think it's interesting every time he brings up how many games Kittle could miss. He just throws out there. He's like, he could miss 10 games this year. And that's true. Now, why he throws out 10 games, I don't know. But it's now in the front of my mind when I think about George Kittle. So these guys were talking about Jake Tonjes. And I want to get your thoughts as to what we should be doing, best ball or managed leagues, and how we handle Tonjes, who showed out, granted, when Kittle was healthy. I think Tonjes had his best games when Kittle was still healthy. And then when he got hurt, Tonjes didn't do a whole lot. But I want to get your thoughts on A, how much time do you think Kittle's going to miss this year as we ballpark it here in early May? And then B, if he does miss, how effective, how important is Tonjes going to be for fantasy football owners?
I think Kittle misses a decent amount of time. I'm kind of on the same page as Theo of like, we could see him miss towards double-digit games. And I like Tonjes. I think the 49ers prioritize their tight ends. They love using their tight ends in that offense, and they're going to continue to do that. And I think what Tonjes showed last year is that he can work the seams. He can work similar areas that George Kittle has excelled. He doesn't necessarily have the run after catch or the, obviously the, upper elite abilities that George Kittle had. But I think Tonjes showed that he can be kind of a reliable target for Brock Purdy. And especially if you can get him like back end of drafts, like he's for sure worth like a flyer, because, if Kittle does miss time, those receivers are still not that reliable. Like we talked about Pearsall, we hope he takes a step. Mike Evans, he has, if he's healthy, he's great, but health is an issue. And I hate doing the thing where it's like, well, someone's got to get the targets, but Kyle Shanahan likes his tight ends, and Kyle Shanahan likes using those guys to kind of open up the passing offense. And I think Tonjes is a serviceable and good enough tight end that he'll work the targets, and he'll be a guy that I think can consistently get you like a, 5 to 7 catches a game. He'll probably command right around that, like 6 to 8 targets a game. I think back end of drafts, if he's there, he's 100% worth a flyer on.
Yeah, you're looking at the 15-16 turn for Tonjes right now. That's behind AJ Barner. It's behind Gunnar Helm. It's ahead of David Njoku. It's ahead of Pat Freiermuth, who we'll get into. I know the conversation was weird. Like we're getting it involved in all these like tight end 25 to tight end 30 discussions in the YouTube chat tonight, which I love.
Of May.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
And I think what makes it so interesting is that there could be news that hits that makes these guys all of a sudden vault into maybe the top 20 of tight ends being drafted, maybe even the top 15 in certain respects too. I also think it's interesting when we're talking about the Niners and we're talking about the sort of like what they perceive their weaknesses are or where they need to get better in the draft. They went wide receiver, defensive end, running back, defensive tackle, offensive tackle, corner, linebacker, and offensive tackle again. Despite this guy in his 30s coming off a torn Achilles, they didn't draft a tight end this year. And this is a pretty good tight end class. Definitely a deep tight end class.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe that says something about what they believe in Tonjes, and maybe that says something about what they believe in Kittle's recovery too. I don't know, but we'll find out as we get closer to the start of the season. All right, we are coming up. Yeah, we've hit an hour. We need to take a break. Here's what we're gonna do. When we come back, I want to talk about one fantasy backup, injury away type running back that I think is standing out a little bit more to me than some of the others that are going around where he's being drafted right now. We have to talk about the Cleveland receivers because I think it's important for us to get that right, who that number one receiver will be this year, or at least number one pass catcher. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more from Steve O'Rourke, the senior film analyst for Fantasy Points. Catch him on X at call me Steve-07. Call me Steve-O, then the number 7, not call me Steve-07. Don't do that one because you won't get him there. Call me Steve-07. We'll have more with him coming up next. I'm Eric Balkman. You're watching FFPC Insider Access. We'll be back right after this. The FFPC Baby Gorilla features a $125 entry fee, but you're still eligible for a $100,000 grand prize. Register for that, as well as its big brother, the Big Gorilla, a $1 million grand prize, $350 to enter that. Remember, $50 discount off every third team that you purchase, and you are eligible right now for the 7 Bananas promo, and you're also eligible for the Early Rampage tournament. 2 tournaments, 1 entry fee. What can be better than that? Probably not a whole lot, unless you win the Jungle Safari for 4 if you hit that 7 Bananas promo 5 times in a row. We also have Dynasty and Empire Dynasty startups available for as little as $100, going up to $5,000 if you want to play fantasy football year-round with the Dynasty aspect. Check that out at myffpc.com. It is best ball season, as the kids say, and the best ball tournament has an extra $100,000 going to the winner this year than it did last year. A $400K grand prize, $125 to get into, $35 is all the Superflex best ball tournament is going to cost you, and you're still eligible to win a $100,000 grand prize there. Guillotine-style chop leagues now available at the FFPC. Those start at $35 and go on up from there. Just don't finish last every week, and you will win your league. Main event early bird registration going on right now. Save $200 off your first team when you register for that main event team or your main event teams. Remember, $600 off each additional team. If you register by May 31st, you're automatically entered in the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, where you will be eligible to draft for a drawing to be selected to draft against industry pros, as we will award 7 free 2027 FFPC main event teams for the 7 league winners of those. And we'll broadcast those leagues right on YouTube too. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It all starts and ends over at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. FFPC Insider Access rolls on for hour number 2 here, ladies and gentlemen. Pleased to be welcoming aboard Mr. Steve O'Rourke on behalf of Fantasy Points. Call me Steve-07 on the X, the senior film analyst joining me tonight. We had a lot of fun in the first hour and continue to have a lot of fun in the second hour. And I teased this before the break, Steve. There is a running back, a rookie running back who just signed his contract that I think is very interesting for fantasy purposes, even though he won't have a role right out of the gate. At least I don't think. If he does, more power to him. But I'm talking about Emmett Johnson, who inked his 4-year rookie contract with Kansas City. The Chiefs traded up, I believe, 16 spots, I want to say, something like that, to get him after they said they were surprised he was still available in the 5th round on day 3 in Pittsburgh. 1,800 plus total yards this past year alone at Nebraska. I think this is interesting. 100th percentile college dominator rating, 99th percentile college target share. And Andy Reid mentioned LaShawn McCoy when he was describing Emmett Johnson as well. Kenneth Walker is the guy in Kansas City, the big prized free agent acquisition. I don't want to make it seem like it's like 1A and 1B because it's not. But knowing Kenneth Walker and his relationship with the training room in Seattle, and knowing that Emmett Johnson is currently a mid-12th round pick, Steve, going around the same spot as Zach Charbonnet, who God knows when he's going to get on the field this year. Woody Marks, who, I mean, might just be a 3rd down guy. We saw he really, I mean, was not all that successful consistently when he was given that number 1 role last year. And then Tyler Algier, who, yeah, he's probably going to get some action in Arizona, but I think the Cardinals are going to want to utilize their number 3 pick to show that everybody that they made the right decision. So I don't know. You think about all the ways that you could utilize a pick on a running back in the 12th round. To me, Emmett Johnson represents a serious amount of upside if Walker were to ever go down, because I think this is the type of guy, as long as his pass pro is good enough, he could be a 3-down guy there if called upon. Might only be a few games this year, but those few games might be what it takes to get you to the playoffs or win a fantasy championship.
Yeah, Emmett Johnson's an interesting guy. Brett Whitefield actually compared him to Bucky Irving in his draft process, and I thought that was. I think it's an interesting comparison, just in the sense that he does have a really good ability to make guys miss. He's a guy that hits the hole at like light speed. He's not the fastest guy in the field, but when he gets the ball, it's downhill, down like right now. And I think that with the way that Kansas City uses running backs in general, they've never really had that much of a workhorse. And I think that Kenneth Walker, obviously, like you said, he's clearly the guy there and will be the guy when he's healthy. But I think Emmett Johnson provides a little bit of a switch up, especially with the way that Kenneth Walker runs. He has that tendency to love to bounce runs. It doesn't matter where the ball's supposed to go designed. He likes to get it outside. And I think what Emmett Johnson provides a little bit differently is that he's going to go where he's supposed to. And that, combined with his ability to be used in the pass game, I really do think provides a little bit different of a little bit of a switch up to what Kenneth Walker is. And I think that as he gets more comfortable in that offense, as he, gets more reps, I think he's a guy that later in the year, he starts to integrate into the offense a little bit more and shows some value of being a guy that can, be a change of tone within that offense and also provide a lot of like action out of the backfield. I mean, 85 catches over 2 years in college is really solid. He's, Andy Reid is one of the best screen game designers in the game. He's very good at screen game stuff. So like, I think that there's a reason they went and got him. And I think it's because of the way that he plays the game is the right complement to what Kenneth Walker is as a runner. So I think he's of those handcuffs that you had mentioned. I like Emmett Johnson more than those guys. Yeah. I think Emmett Johnson has a higher ceiling if he were to get into, if Kenneth Walker were to go down and Emmett Johnson were called upon to be, that, number 1 fiddle in that offense. It probably goes to more of like a running back by committee, the way that it's operated in Kansas City the last couple of years without having a real number 1 guy. But I think Emmett Johnson's a really interesting player. I think he's very good at evading tackles and making guys miss despite not having like these necessarily elite change of direction abilities. And I think he fits that offense well because that offensive line they're bulky in the middle. They move guys in the middle with Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. And I think that, I think he provides a lot of value to that offense specifically. And I think it was like, this draft was so much of like a huge complaint of, oh my gosh, these landing spots are atrocious. Yeah. He's one of the guys where it's like, no, this fits really well with how he likes to play the game. And it's a coach that will I think, be able to get the most out of it.
I want to move on and go to Atlanta and stay in the backfield, but let's talk about the quarterbacks in Atlanta here. Matt Ryan was on Atlanta 680 The Fan, and he said, Matt Ryan, who former MVP, who is now the Falcons president of football ops, says, we don't really know, quote, we don't really know what to expect at the beginning of training camp. Penix, who is recovering from this knee injury. Stefanski, the new head coach there, already said they're not going to rush him back. It seems like it's going to be Tagovailoa to start the season. I feel fairly comfortable in saying that I don't believe Tagovailoa holds on to that job all season. I think there's going to come to be a point, especially even if Atlanta's not all that great. I don't think that division's all that great, and you don't have to be all that great to win it. And maybe the shift from moving from Tagovailoa to Penix at some point in the season might benefit Atlanta in jumpstarting that offense and winning a few games and maybe winning the NFC South this year. I don't know what your thoughts are, and I want you to share them now. Specifically, how much does the quarterback in Atlanta affect players like Drake London, like Kyle Pitts, maybe Zechariah Branch we could throw in there as well? For fantasy, when we're drafting those guys, especially London and Pitts, do we need to be cognizant that the quarterback situation is a little bit nebulous and might continue to be a little bit nebulous throughout the season? Or is that not a big factor when you're deciding to select or not select London and Pitts?
Not with Pitts. I think with Stefanski coming over, he has a propensity to really enjoy using his tight ends as he did in Cleveland. I think Pitts stays pretty steady, and I like change of quarterback doesn't make that much of a difference. With Penix, he was good, and Penix looked to him a lot, decent amount of the time. The guy that I'd be worried about is if Tua is in there longer term. I'd probably knock London a little bit. Tua he just did not look to have the strength behind his passes last year. And he working his outside receivers, even with what Jalen Waddle was last year. I thought he was really good. He deserved more targets, but I think that Drake London's going to be the guy that takes the biggest hit if Tua is in there longer term. If Penix comes back and is healthy and able to start the season or takes over pretty early, I would bump Drake London up. But if the longer Tua is in, the more worried I would be about the consistent output of Drake London.
I know I brought this up before. I'm going to say it again. I think about what we have seen Tagovailoa do over the last couple of years, especially under Mike McDaniel. They really made it a point to get the ball out of his hand right away, right? Whether that's to protect him from the rush or whatever. That's how he moved the ball down the field. Now, you look at the four of the main pass catchers on Atlanta right now. You mentioned it with Pitts. Bijan Robinson, that's probably a good thing that Tagovailoa is getting the ball out of his hands right away because there's going to be a lot of stuff to Robinson. Yep. Zechariah Branch, we know what he was in college, right? He caught all these passes behind the line of scrimmage, like all these quick hitters. That's how he got so much of his yardage at Georgia. Who's the guy that it really affects? London is probably the guy that is really going to be hit if it's Tagovailoa in there. So I think you make a great point, and it's important to reiterate that because of those four pass catchers I just mentioned. I mean, obviously Robinson is going first among all of them, right? 102, but London's next, and it's not particularly close. When it goes to Pitts and then Branch after that. Okay, moving on. The Ravens rookie receivers got some press. Speaking with the media, Jesse Minter, the new head coach, said that they're hoping to take advantage of Jacoby Lane's red zone abilities. Big guy, 6'4", 200, huge wingspan, huge hands. This is a player that might be complementary with Zay Flowers already on this offense. And we also found out, speaking of the Ravens, that Elijah Surratt is probably going to be playing in the slot. This is according to a report from Jamison Hensley, who covers the Ravens for ESPN. So you're looking at Flowers on the outside with Lane on the outside, Surratt in the slot. Obviously, Andrews is going to be out there quite a bit. I don't know where this leaves Rashad Bateman, who, by the way, is under contract with the Ravens through 2029. So I don't know what that means. What are you reading into what we need to know for fantasy-wise, knowing the financial commitment that Bateman got, but also the draft capital that Surratt got round 5, and then I think Lane was like round 3 or round 4 or whatever it was, that the Ravens decided to draft not one, but both of these guys. What do you make of the Ravens receivers right now, Steve?
Yeah, it feels like a crapshoot, honestly. Just Bateman's been inconsistent. What I really like about his game is his ability to operate out of structure with Lamar Jackson. I think that's honestly where he's been the best. His ability to find space in the open field when Jackson starts moving around. I'm very intrigued by Jacoby Lane. Jacoby Lane, my biggest concern about him is his play strength. He can get rattled and knocked off pretty easily. He's really tall, lanky, but if he can if he can improve on that, I think he's probably the guy that comes out being the second fiddle to Zay Flowers, in my opinion, just because I think everything else about his game is really good. And I think he can be a really good receiver. It'll be interesting to see how he matches up against more physical corners in the NFL compared to what he was working with in college. Surratt out of the slot, it'll be interesting, but like the Ravens do really love their only 2 wide receiver sets. It'll be interesting to see if they continue with that this year. I know obviously they had coaching changes, so we'll see if they go that like super heavy set again this year. But Jacoby Lane, I think, has the highest ceiling behind Zay Flowers, in my opinion, because I think that the one downside to his game is something that I think he can fix. If he just bulks up a little bit, he has room on his frame, and I don't think it would affect his speed too much. I don't think it would affect his play style too much, but I think he's a guy that I'd be most interested in out of that like group behind Zay Flowers, especially as like Mark Andrews continues to age and we've seen him kind of lose a step a little bit. I think that Jacoby Lane can provide a threat on the outside that offense has been missing the last couple of years. And they've looked to Rashad Bateman, and I just don't know if he's delivered. I bet you it's a decent amount of split between Bateman and Jacoby Lane, and I think it'll kind of be like hey, whoever shows out the most, you're going to get the most reps as the season goes on. So Jacoby Lane's the one I'm watching the most. Elijah Surratt, if they're moving him in the slot, that's interesting, but I don't know if he jumps off the page right away this year. Like maybe, down the road in a couple of years, we see him used more often, but I'm most excited about Jacoby Lane because I think that he has the upside to be a consistent threat in that offense.
Real quick, Steve, little trivia. What round was Rashad Bateman drafted in 2021?
God, wasn't he a first rounder?
He was a first round pick.
Yeah, he was like the 20th pick or 21st pick, wasn't he?
27.
Okay, yeah. 27th, yeah.
Which to me, like, I totally forgot. I had to look it up because I'm like, God, what round was Bateman taken? I forgot he was a first round pick. And, it is what it is. I mean, they have the Ravens receivers this year that they have assembled, that this receiver room that they've assembled for Declan Doyle, the new offensive coordinator, who really is the sort of the guy in that offense because Jesse Minter is a defensive guy, right?
Yeah.
So you look at what this Ravens offense could be in a year when Lamar Jackson, granted, is another year older, but he was hurt. I mean, it's so many injuries last year.
Yeah.
So the Ravens offense is definitely one to watch in 2026. This is going to be interesting and hopefully fun as well. In that same division, while the Ravens were busy stacking receivers in the draft, their rival, the Cleveland Browns, were also stacking receivers, maybe with a little bit more draft capital, though. Casey Concepcion goes in the first round. Denzel Boston, he was a second round pick, right? Mid-second round. Yeah. So they go with both of those guys. And then we get this Mary Kay Cabot report, who has been covering the Browns forever. And she said that the Browns are hoping that Jerry Jeudy is going to, quote, rebound from a down 2025 season, and reclaim his role as the number one receiver. If you remember, I'm old enough to remember, Steve, I think you are too, all the way back in 2024, Jerry Jeudy caught 92 passes for 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns. I'm going to repeat that. Jerry Jeudy, not last season, the year before that, 92, 1,229, and 4 touchdowns. This past year was bad, 50 catches, 600 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's under contract through the next 2 years. And if they're hoping that he can be the number one receiver, we want to get this right. Certainly, we're very excited about Concepcion. I think there's not a whole lot of excitement about Denzel Boston on this team, but I maybe Jeudy should factor into our drafting decisions more, not only if we're deciding to pick him or not pick him, but maybe the impact of Jerry Jeudy should not be underestimated when we're considering drafting KC Concepcion this year. I think it's important, although the quarterback play is not going to be great on this team, or reportedly won't be that great. But we need to figure this out. Who is going to be the number one wide receiver when it's all said and done? And we look back on the 2026 season, who is going to be left standing as the Browns receiver you should have drafted?
I think it is Jerry Jeudy. The guy has just been marred by bad QB play his entire career. The poor guy has just been beaten down with bad quarterbacks. But he's still a good receiver. He's still one of the best receivers against man-to-man coverage when it comes to separating. And if you look at it, like if you look in the years past of his yards per route run against man coverage, he was, it is astronomical. He's averaging like 4.5 yards per route run when it came against man coverage. I still believe he's a good receiver, and I still believe he's the number one in that room. I think KC Concepcion is an exciting player. I'm very high on him. I was pretty much in step with Brett. I think he and I at the Senior Bowl, it was when KC Concepcion was supposed to make an appearance at the Senior Bowl. He ended up pulling out, but he was the guy that I kind of went to Brett and was like, dude, this guy's the real deal. I think this guy's like should be like one of the top 2 receivers in the draft this year. And so like, I'm excited about his upside, but I really do think that Jerry Jeudy is the number one receiver. I really think that he's the guy that they're going to be able to rely on the most. And I think that all of his down years have not necessarily been his fault. I think that like he really is, like I said, still a good receiver, still the number one on this team. I'm terrified of them trotting out Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
So that like severely limits my upside on Jerry Jeudy, but I still think that he's the number one guy in that room.
So listen to this. And maybe it's rookie fever right now, Steve, that everybody still has. But I'm going to tell you the top 3 receivers in order being drafted in the FFPC Big Gorilla. This is redraft over the last 10 days. 10th round, KC Concepcion. 14th round, Denzel Boston. 17th round, Jerry Jeudy. And I'll tell you, you just went out there. You said Jerry Judy's probably gonna be the number one. For me, let's just take that out of the equation. Like the receiver I want to have based on what I have to surrender in drafts, as far as my draft picks go, I'll take Jerry Jeudy in the 17th round. I mean, for the upside that he could have as the number one receiver, a guy who is, 2 seasons or 1 season removed from having a 90 catch year. I think there's something to be said for that. Now, the offense is not the same as it was back then. That was Flacco, right? Was Flacco throwing the ball to Jeudy that year?
Yeah.
24. Yeah. So you have a situation where, the quarterback probably isn't going to be as good, but it's a 17th round pick. If you're taking KC Concepcion in the 10th round, granted, you can still get away with that if that's a miss. I mean, that's wide receiver 46. You can get away with that in the FFPC where you only have to start 2 receivers. But the hit is like non-existent if you miss on Jerry Jeudy in the 17th round.
Right.
So I think there's a lot to like about that. And with this Mary Kay Cabot report today, I mean, maybe we'll see a spike in Jerry Judy's ADP. He's gone as high as the 16th round in the last 10 days. So I don't know. We'll see. Moving on here, as we have, allotted our Cleveland Browns talk. We're done. We can't fit in anymore. Otherwise, they take us off YouTube. Isaac Guerrero, Kalen Black, Jordan James, some of the many names that are in the Niners backfield, at least currently. The Athletics' Vic Tafur said that Guerrero, quote, seems like he is buried and will be looking for a new team. The Christian McCaffrey workload last year cannot be underrated. And certainly getting the Niners backup running back is going to be significant this year, especially if McCaffrey misses 1 game, 3 games, 10 games, 15 games, whatever. Who are you drafting as it stands right now as the backup running back in San Francisco behind McCaffrey? Are you going Kalen Black? Are you going Jordan James, Isaac Grendo, somebody else, Tyrion Davis-Price, Garrison Hurst, perhaps Roger Craig? I don't know. They're all possible.
Trey Sermon.
Yeah, Trey Sermon is another one. Joe Williams, will bring him into the conversation as well. But if you're drafting right now, Steve, who's your backup Niners running back that you want?
It's probably Jordan James, I guess. I don't know. I think Garendo probably gets kicked out here. I don't know if he
would you stay away from it? I mean, is this a handcuff situation that you don't want to be involved in then?
Yeah, yes, I would, just because I think that you would see, I don't know. I just think that if McCaffrey went down, it's going to be a sporadic jump to go get all 3 of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't want to put a large amount of my free agent budget onto any of these guys, because Kyle Shanahan, when it comes to backup running backs, he kind of just throws it out there and sees what happens. And I don't really love the upside of any of these guys, whether James, Black, Garendo.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably James or Black would be where I'd lean the most. I think Kalen Black has a good amount of experience, so I'm talking myself into him over Jordan James, but it is a one where I would almost I'd be better about letting everybody else go after those and then seeing what happens after a week, and then trying to dive back in and maybe go after one of those guys and try and trade for him at a little bit lower value or something like that. But it's not a handcuff situation that I think you can pound the table for any of them, because I don't think any of them have this massive differentiating ability that says this guy should be over that. I think Kalen Black has interesting value within the pass game, but yeah, it's one that I'd probably just bunt on and say I'm gonna remove myself from this.
I skipped this over, but I have to get back to it on the show sheet. Let's talk about Arizona here. Mike LaFleur told the press that it won't be the worst thing for him, end quote, if Carson Beck ends up sitting for part or all of his rookie season. To me, I take that to the understanding that at the surface level, LaFleur believes Carson Beck is making starts this year. And he's not going to be making starts at the start of the year. At least I don't think he'll be making starts at the start of the year. It'll be Brissett. It'll be Minshew, who I think Minshew is actually making more money than Brissett this year. Don't quote me on that. I always say that, and I always mean to look it up, and I always forget. But I think he might be. That's beside the point. The point here I want to make is, how concerned should we be knowing that the Cardinals might be in a much better situation by drafting one of the 2027 elite quarterbacks at the top of the draft? Manning, Moore, the guy from Oklahoma State whose name I always forget. Any of these players that are going to be drafted super high next year. Brett Whitefield has said something to the effect of if you watch Carson Beck when he was facing pressure in college, as experienced as he is, he was peeing down his leg the whole time.
Yeah.
Something to the effect of that, which gives me pause that this is the guy throwing to Michael Wilson. This is the guy throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. This is the guy throwing to Jeremiah Love. This is the guy throwing to Trey McBride. And that could be in the money weeks for the playoffs and for the national tournaments, worldwide tournaments that the FFPC is doing, right? You might be relying on Carson Beck if you draft these Cardinals. How concerned should we legitimately be that this might not be a repeat of Brissett slinging the ball all over the place in 2025 at the end of the season, where we loved having all these Cardinals? this could be a bad situation if Carson Beck is out there throwing the football to these guys. Certainly nowhere near the ceiling as what we saw last year. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what this reads to me is that, hey, we got a rookie quarterback in here. We're probably going to be really bad. We're probably going to be in play for one of the top draft picks. If we get to a situation where the season has officially been thrown, they've thrown the towel in, it's get Carson Beck in there to see what we have of because I think, there's obviously a scenario where, hey, Carson Beck comes in, plays well, and now they want to move forward with him as a starter, similar to the way it worked with Seattle back with Russell Wilson of oh my gosh, we stumbled into this 3rd round quarterback that can actually play and lead the team. I think that's the way it reads to me, is that if they feel confident in how he's progressing, they're going to give him games at the end of the year to see, do we have to go quarterback at number 1, or do we have a number 1 quarterback in our building and now we can build elsewhere because we already have him there. I would be worried that is a situation that you'd be coming down to of you get to week 11, week 12, and it's, hey, throw Carson Beck in there for the last 6 games. Let's see what we got. And it turns into this Jeremiah Love pounding the ball 30 times because Carson Beck, can't withstand pressure.
If they're even able to keep the ball long enough to give Jeremiah Love 30 carries.
Right. So that does read to me of hey, we're going to give him a chance because we want to see what we have, because they know they're not going long-term with Brissett. They know they're not going long-term with Minshew. Beck, we allotted capital to him. Let's see what this does for our team, because, hey, maybe he is legit. But I'd be surprised if he ends up earning reps, but it's definitely a concern. If they're talking about it that way, that does read to me that hey, we're going to see what we have with him at some point in the year. I kind of hope that it happens middle of the year, you're getting let's let him sit for 6-7 weeks, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, he goes in there and kind of craps the bed. And then it's okay, that was bad. Get him out. Let's go back with Brissett and have a competent offense. So we're not, completely terrible, but it does look like a situation where they're willing to throw him in at some point, which is kind of what you heard during the draft. I think we started to hear a little bit of there are teams in the NFL that think that Carson Beck could potentially be a starting quarterback, but that's not a situation where he would thrive. That offensive line isn't great. The weapons are solid, but I would be concerned if they move into him later in the year, and it's not if he's not in there by week 8 or 9, I would start to get a little bit nervous that it's coming down the line in week 13, 14, 15.
I'm not going to tell anybody how to draft, but I will just caution everybody when you're considering Cardinals and you're on the clock. Trey McBride, these are all big gorilla ADPs I'm going to read off. Trey McBride's a 1st-round pick. Jeremiah Love is a 2nd-round pick. Marvin Harrison is a 6th-round pick. Michael Wilson is a 7th-round pick. These are all big boys, single-digit draft pick rounds that we're talking about here. So don't say I didn't warn you. If you're ticked off about McBride putting up 2 for 15 lines in the fantasy playoffs, or Marvin Harrison with 1 catch for 8 yards, Steve O'Rourke and I warned you on May 7th, 2026, that this was a possibility. All right, let's move on. On that note, I want to take our last break. When we come back, I have to talk about some of these guys that you saw in person at the Senior Bowl. Malachi Fields, we have not talked about at all tonight. I want to get into him. Nick Singleton is a guy that's been creeping up draft boards as well. I want to get your thoughts on what you saw from him, or what you didn't see from Singleton specifically, I guess.
Yeah.
He broke his foot. But that and so much more. We're talking FFPC Insider Access fantasy football in the FFPC. Steve O'Rourke, the senior the senior film analyst for Fantasy Points. I'm Eric Balkman. Don't go anywhere. We're going to get right back after this to get your rookie fix in as you're wrapping up those rookie drafts and what have you. Maybe this will help you out for best ball. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. Steve O'Rourke and I are working very hard to give you some good fantasy football advice. If you want to put that to good use, check out the FFPC Best Ball Tournament now with $100,000 more for the grand prize, $400K going to the winner. Don't forget about the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, $100K to the winner there, just $35 to enter. The Big Gorilla $1 million grand prize, 7 Bananas promo is live, as well as the early Rampage Tournament. And the Big Gorilla has a baby brother, the Baby Gorilla. Win $100,000 for just $125 entry fee, the exact same format as the Big Gorilla. Don't forget about the main event early bird deadline coming up on May 31st. Save $200 on your first team. Save $600 on each additional team. Chop leagues, if you want to play guillotine style, they're available at myffpc.com. And Dynasty and Empire Startups, don't forget about those as well. If you want to play fantasy football every single day of the year, you can do that right now. myffpc.com. That is myffpc.com. Final segment of FFPC Insider Access here tonight, a.k.a. the segment where we try to jam all the stuff in that I wanted to talk about earlier, but we couldn't because I just kept blabbing. Steve O'Rourke is the star of the show tonight, the guest co-host tonight at CallMeStevo7 on the X, of course, the senior film analyst for Fantasy Points, hopping aboard with me tonight. A guy who made a trip to Alabama a few months ago and checked out the Senior Bowl. Was this your first Senior Bowl, Steve?
It was.
And what was that like? What was that experience like for you? I've never been there, so you tell me.
Yeah, it was really fun. It's fun to get to see a lot of those guys compete against just like different levels of competition compared to where they came from, and just a little bit more intensive, a lot of one-on-ones. It's fun to see those guys and even be able to get down on the field and like just talk to them for a second. It was cold this year, which was a little bit unfortunate because, the first year it's like 45, but overall it's a really fun experience to just be able to see those guys in such an intimate setting.
Did you get a chance to like talk with any of these guys one-on-one at all?
Yeah. So the one guy that we talked to was actually, Tyron Montgomery. He came out of John Carroll, and he's one that I think I'm pretty sure he went undrafted this year, but someone that I'm interested to see what happens with his career, because he just his where he came from as far as, coming from John Carroll. He didn't start playing football until he was in college. And so just the raw ability that he had and the way he really stood his own against all of that D1 talent there. He was a really just a stand-up kid, and really like very, very well spoken, really, really nice and genuine kid. So like, I'm very excited to see what happens with him, because I think he's got juice and he's got like legit speed. Like, I think he said that he's, he can probably get into the 4.2s in his 40s. So like, I think he's a guy that, if he can stick around and keep growing as a player, I think he could be like a interesting slot player for a team down the road.
He is a Tennessee Titan now. You're right. He was not drafted. He signed as an undrafted free agent. Could follow in the footsteps of another famous John Carroll alum that crushed it in the NFL for many years, London Fletcher.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens with Tyron Montgomery in the NFL. The first guy I want to bring up here is Ted Hurst, because not a lot of people were talking about this guy until the Senior Bowl. It seemed like it was his coming out party, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not comparing these two players, because I think they are different players. But I think about Jack Besh and the big push that he got in the Senior Bowl in 2025, right? Like, nobody was talking about Besh. Then he catches a winning touchdown, and this great story, not great story, but the sad story about his brother and everything. And he gets pumped up to a second-round pick and really does nothing. Ted Hurst, the guy that out of Georgia State Georgia State. Am I getting that right?
Yep.
Okay. we didn't really know a whole lot about, didn't go up against great competition. And all of a sudden he's crushing it at the Senior Bowl. And then he ascends up to the second round. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers take him, or second or third round. I can't remember what it was. It was day 2 for sure. And the Buccaneers take Hurst. I don't want to compare Hurst and Besh, but there is that comparison of these guys rising quite a bit because of their Senior Bowl performances. What did you see from Hurst? What have you seen on film? And what do you think about him being a long-term replacement for Mike Evans? Not that he'll ever be Mike Evans, but operating at least that role on that offense.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think his ceiling is limitless. And the big thing going into that week was, he blew out with Georgia State against lesser competition on a team that wasn't very good, but he was the one bright spot on that team. And I think a lot of people had the question of like, well, what's it going to look like when he steps up against, a lot of these guys that are coming from D1 programs that are supposed to be, better defenders and all of that. Like, what does it look like? And boy, did he show out. That dude is an athlete. That dude can jump out of the building. He's got good speed. He's got good footwork. And I really like him in that Tampa Bay. It'll be interesting to see what happens this year. I think that they have kind of just like a wide range of really interesting receivers, but outside of Egbuka, no one that you can really pound the table to say like this guy's going to be consistently on the field. The Buccaneers kind of seem like a team that might kind of play out similar to Green Bay in the way they use these receivers. Of you just get like 4 or 5 guys that have 60% route shares, and it's just kind of a grab bag every week of who knows what's going to happen. But I really think Ted Hurst, he is. I think he's going to be a ball player long term. I think he's going to show out. I think that the Senior Bowl was a correct coming out party. And I think that with a guy like Baker Mayfield, who's willing to let it fly, who's willing to put the ball, somewhat in harm's way, I think that that's the perfect guy for Ted Hurst, because Ted Hurst can blow guys out of the water. He can win jump ball catches, and he's just an athlete. And I really think that I think he'll come on a little bit later in the year. I really like Jalen McMillan. And I think that it could end up being end up being a 3-headed of Jalen McMillan, Ted Hurst, and Egbuka with like a spattering of Tez Johnson. But Ted Hurst is in this group of receivers where we are kind of seeing this like callback to this like traditional X type receiver. I think that that's what he provides, is that a guy that can win one-on-one outside, down the field, jump ball situations. I really think that, again, he's one of the few guys where I feel really good about his landing spot, because I think he's in a good offense and with a quarterback that will utilize his abilities to the fullest extent that they can.
I think the Packers thing is appropriate. I mean, Kate Otten down there too, and I think they drafted a tight end this year as well. So we'll see what happens with Hurst and all those guys. But I think Sigmund Blumen from Football Guys was talking about this. Like, you think about the hits that Jason Licht has had at receiver, Egbuka, Tez Johnson late. Jalen McMillan is another one that has shown flashes of what he can do when he's healthy. Hurst just could be added. That Chris Godwin's another one. Hurst could just be added to that club, and maybe not only a replacement for Evans, maybe he's a replacement for Godwin. Maybe long term it's going to be Hurst and Egbuka as the new Evans and Godwin. I don't know.
I do think he is like the guy they want for Mike Evans. I think he kind of fits that exact like similar body type. It's not necessarily super similar play style, but Mike Evans is a little bit more of a physical guy, and whereas Ted Hurst is more of a burner. But I think that's what they want. They want that X receiver that they can line up on the outside and say, go win one-on-one. We're going to throw it up to you. And I think that's what he provides.
How intriguing is Malachi Fields? This is a player I was drafting down at the KFFSC in Louisville in January for the big Super Sunday thing that they do every year. And I noticed some smart players down there drafting a lot of Malachi Fields. This is before he was on the Giants, at least. But now you look at the situation he's in. Wan'Dale Robinson is a Titan. Malik Neighbors is still recovering from his knee surgery. And we haven't gotten really glowing reports on that. Not necessarily anything bad, but just kind of unknown, where nobody really knows how close he is in his recovery. Enter Malachi Fields, who Joe Shane said could be the power forward for this Giants wide receiver group. You saw him up close again, Steve, another guy that really showed out and cut his teeth at the Senior Bowl, impressed a lot of people, and probably part of the reason, or maybe a big part of the reason, why he was drafted so high by the G-men this year.
Yeah, he's like somewhat not like, again, not similar player, but like similar archetype of that traditional X type receiver where he's 6'4", he's a big body, he's really hard to knock off, he's got long arms, and he just can win in tight spaces. I think he is another guy that, he can operate somewhat similar to someone like a Romeo Doubs, I would say. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that, like, I think that he's not going to win a lot over the middle. He's not really going to win a ton with his route running, but he can just get bigger than guys. I think Joe Shane saying he can be the power forward is like the perfect analogy for what Malachi Fields is. He's not, like I said, not the fastest guy, not the quickest feet, but he's tough to knock off his stem. He's tough to work around, and he can catch the ball all over. And, he didn't get a ton of usage in college. And I think that his build and who he is as a player is probably better built for the NFL game than it really is for the college game. So I think that he's an interesting guy, and I think he could be like the number 2 target getter in New York, just because of the reliability that I think he can provide for that offense.
Steve G also reminding me to not forget about Darnell Mooney. Yes, Mooney is still there. Chris Lude just drafted him in the 6th round of his FFPC rookie draft as well. So we can't forget about Mooney. And then obviously Likely and Theo Johnson too. A lot of two tight end sets there. I think Matthew Berry said this back in the day. This is a while ago when I can't remember exactly who they had on the team. But Tampa had Vincent Jackson, Mike Evans, and then they got another like super like 6'4", 220-pound receiver or whatever. Or no, you know who it was? It was it might have been Kellen Winslow Jr. It was some big tight end is what it was. Yeah. Or maybe it was O.J. Howard. I can't remember. But Matthew Berry said, yeah, the Buccaneers are going to lead the league in rebounding. And that could happen with the Giants this year too. Trying out Fields and Likely and Theo Johnson and all these guys. So, throwaway comments seem to happen a lot early on in the drafting process. And I remember a comment that maybe was meant as a throwaway. Maybe it wasn't. But it still lingers in my mind. And I'm talking about Clint Kubiak talking about the importance of having 2 running backs in the NFL. He obviously just won a Super Bowl where the majority of the season he had Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, which is sort of what they had the year before too, in Seattle at least. The initial reaction from that comment from a lot of people was, oh no, here's what's going to tank Ashton Genty in year 2. They're going to bring somebody else in. Well, they didn't really do that, except for the Mike Washington Jr. pick, which they made on day 3 of the NFL draft. And I want to bring us back to that comment that Kubiak made. Is Washington, in your opinion, Steve, simply just an injury away type guy where he's only going to have value? Or is he going to have a role next to Ashton Genty this year? Not necessarily 1A or 1B, but where Washington is kind of eating into more of the workload from Genty than we would really be comfortable with. And we have to answer that question too, because if you're thinking about drafting Ashton Genty and thinking he's going to be the 3-down guy and he's going to be the bell cow and he's not going to surrender any work, that's important. He's running back 5. He's a 1st-round pick. We got to make sure we get this right. What do you think Washington's impact is going to be on Genty?
I don't think it's super high to where it'll really eat into his carries. I think what Washington offers is just like a guy that can come in and pound his head down the middle and blow stuff up every once in a while with 3-4 carries in a game, maybe. But I don't see Kubiak operating with a backfield anywhere close to similar to what he was doing with Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, just because I think Genty is a much more complete running back than either of those guys were in Seattle. So I think, Mike Washington, if anything, he'll be an interesting guy to watch what happens when his 2nd contract comes around. But I don't really see him being much of a concern as far as Genty's workload.
You saw him in person at the Senior Bowl when I mean, his big calling card was the NFL Combine when he blew everybody away with his athleticism. When you watched him at the Senior Bowl, did the athleticism stand out to you at all?
It does show out. I mean, he worked really well pass rep stuff, picking up blocks as well as just working one-on-one against some of the linebackers. You could see the speed and you could see the change of pace and change of direction ability. But so like I think like his touches when he gets them will be valuable to the team, but I like don't think that he's going to warrant touches to the point where it's like, oh no, we need to start knocking Genty down.
Okay. Question in the chat. Tom Smith, our good buddy, wants to know, is Skylar Bell worthy of a late round click? And Bell went to I don't know, given like where he could have gone, pretty good situation with Buffalo. We'll see what they have in DJ Moore. We know what they have in Khalil Shakir. This is still a team that likes to run the football a lot. I'll answer first, and I'll just tell you, Steve, that I think if I'm looking at like a wide receiver 8 or a wide receiver 9 in a best ball, like a traditional 28 round best ball, yeah, I mean, I think he's worth a click then. But I'm trying to find a different way to utilize a 19th round pick or an 18th round pick than Skylar Bell, and that's where he's going in the Big Gorilla right now, which is a 20 round managed league. So I'm kind of out on him on managed leagues. Best deep traditional best ball leagues, yeah, I can get on board with them super late.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that, yeah, as a best ball guy, he's valuable just because of the lack of weapons in Buffalo as receiving options. Of like, if he were to start coming on, he's a guy that, like, if he builds a good rapport with Josh Allen, gets on the field more consistently, he could be a guy that then works his way just because there's targets that need to be had there and they don't have a ton to rely on. So, but like, yeah, it was managed leagues, redraft. I don't think I'd be touching him really. I think he'd be one that I'd keep an eye on to see what his route share starts looking like. But yeah, best ball, I think he'd be an interesting one just because that could happen later in the year, that he does start to become something in that offense that's devoid of something in the receiving game.
He may have a future there for dynasty too. I mean, I think like you want to talk about like a 3rd or 4th round, maybe 5th round rookie pick in FFPC. Yeah, I can see how Skylar Bell would make some sense there. Just what happens, because again, there's the pass catchers in Buffalo. It's going to be weird this year. Like I know the Bills haven't given up, at least publicly, they haven't been giving up on Keon Coleman. Shakir, I know, and I can't remember if Brett Whitefield said this. Somebody said it, where Shakir could be so much more if the Bills utilized his skill set a little bit better, where it seems like they're kind of neutering him a little bit or not allowing him to really, go full Super Saiyan, at least what his powers would be. So I think he is just who he is. And then we'll see the impact that DJ Moore has on this offense. But Skylar Bell, I mean, there's a lot to like about him. Yeah, the competition level at UConn wasn't all that great. But now that he's out there, I mean, he's one of those guys where I want to see it before I start drafting him. But best balls, that's not going to hurt you. Okay, a player that you did not get to see at the Senior Bowl because he broke his foot, Nick Singleton, a player that is going to an up-and-coming offense in the Tennessee Titans that have 2 running backs that I don't think necessarily have long-term futures there, in Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears in front of him. Singleton, if we look back to what he was, in high school and then his first year at Penn State, I mean, this guy seemed like he was going to be a slam dunk first-round running back pick, and then it didn't happen. And I would imagine that the trajectory he is on is probably most likely going to continue, where he's just not ever going to be a top 10 running back in fantasy. But that doesn't mean he can't be useful. What do you make of Singleton, at least year 1? How much is he going to factor into that offense? Do we need to be drafting him in redraft leagues? Is he already ahead of Tyjae Spears, in your opinion?
I don't think he's ahead of Tyjae Spears. I think Tyjae Spears has more upside than Nick Singleton. I think Nick Singleton kind of is what he is. Doesn't have a super high ceiling, but he's a legit guy. He can play, but I just don't know if he offers the upside in the passing game that Tyjae Spears offers. I don't think I'd be really touching him that much in redraft at all. he just doesn't really have like that like differentiating ability. Like he's one of those guys that's like good at most things but not great at anything.
Mhm.
And so like I think if it got to a situation where, Tony Pollard goes down or something like that, then like his name enters the conversation of like someone that can eat up carries, be a guy that, can average right around 4.5 yards per carry. But like, I don't know. I just like don't see him as a guy that can like jump out and be a difference maker. I think he's a guy that kind of is good second fiddle, good 1B throughout his career, or like, two in a running back by committee type situation. Cause there just wasn't that like differentiating factor. I didn't love his hip mobility and stuff, and just his change of direction stuff. So I think he can be a good NFL player, but I don't know if he's ever going to be like a good fantasy guy.
Yeah, and I think that's accurate too. Definitely fair to say. And the other great thing about Singleton is if you do like him, you don't have to pay a big price for him right now,
Right.
which is always good to see. What did you write about Caleb Douglas? Because Douglas was a player that I really, quite frankly, was off my radar completely until the Dolphins made him a third-round pick this year. But you saw him at the Senior Bowl, and I know you wrote him up for fantasy points. What can you tell us about Caleb Douglas?
Yeah, I really liked Caleb Douglas. I was very impressed by him. Even going into the week, I had watched some of his Texas Tech tape, and he kind of was a guy that I had flagged as like, okay, I want to pay attention to him. And it's a fun landing spot for him specifically because going to Miami with Jeff Hafley, I think he kind of can drop in right away and be a Romeo Dubs type guy in that Jeff Hafley offense where he's really good at winning on the line. He's got good feet, and for how tall he is, he plays faster than like his height than like what it looks like. It's almost like a deceptive speed. Like it's not game breaking by any means, but like he understands how to find guys blind spots, and he understands how to use his length to win downfield. And then he showed a pretty adept quickness on the line that like guys his size don't normally show. And so I think he's a guy that can win vertically. And Malik Willis coming in from the Green Bay offense, Jeff Hafley coming in and bringing in that Green Bay offense, I think that he can operate in a similar vein to what Green Bay had Romeo Dubs operate, which is a lot of vertical stemming routes, a lot of stuff where it's like hitch routes, back shoulder stuff. And again, this is another team that like I hate to do the thing where it's like, hey, someone's got to get the targets, but in Miami, someone's going to have to get the targets.
Yep.
And I think he's a guy that can win right away just because of his height and his like better feet than what he should have at his height. So I'm very excited about him. I think he's a guy that I think will surprise people because I know the draft capital took everyone by surprise. And like I was one of the few where I was like, yeah, I would totally I agreed with the capital. I agreed with going with him there because of like once you got into the third round, there's a lot of different guys that had like very specific skill sets. And I thought that Caleb Douglas had like the most well-rounded game of those guys that were going like in that third, fourth round of receivers in the draft this year.
One of the monikers of the Packers passing game the last couple of years was no block, no rock. Well, that's not going to be a problem for Caleb Douglas. He's going to be out there a lot because of his blocking ability, and he should be getting the ball. A lot of opportunities in that Miami offense. Steve, I really wish we could have broken down the Lions offense a little bit more. We will have to save that for next time.
Absolutely.
This was so much fun.
I had a blast. I really appreciate this, man. It was so much fun.
Yeah, 2 hours flew by. And I just one more time for the viewers. Give them a taste of what you'll be working on for fantasy points throughout this 2026 campaign.
Yeah, I mean, pay attention to average separation score. That's my baby. I'm going to try to be more content forward this year. I've been a lot more behind the scenes in the past, but I'd like to bring more of a little more content flavor to my repertoire this year. So I'm going to be more active on Twitter as we get into training camp and stuff like that. And yeah, just go subscribe to Fantasy Points, give our guys love, because I think we do a lot of really good work. And I believe that we have the best data in the business too.
Yeah, Fantasy Points on X, Fantasy PTS. You can follow the Fantasy Points data on X as well, and check out everything. And now we know who birthed ass for Fantasy Points.
Yes.
The average separation score was Steve O'Rourke's love child, as it were. I will continue. We will all continue to connect with you on X at callmestevo7. Steve, this has been great. We will do this again sometime for sure. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk with you again very soon.
Appreciate it, Eric. Have a good one.
You too. That is Steve O'Rourke, ladies and gentlemen, from Fantasy Points, hanging out with me on FFPC Insider Access tonight. That will complete our show. Reminder, Best Ball Tournament, Superflex Best Ball Tournament, available now at myffpc.com. That Best Ball Tournament has an extra $100K going in the grand prizes here, now up to $400,000. The Big Gorilla is $1 million grand prize, as is the main event. Get in on the main event now before May 31st to save $200 off your first team, $600 off each additional team. And of course, you're entered into that Pros versus Joes drawing, where you can compete for 7 free main event teams if you get selected for that as well. The Baby Gorilla, $125 to enter, $100K grand prize, 7 bananas and early Rampage promos going on with the Big Gorilla right now. The Chop Leagues, Guillotine Style Leagues, $35 on up. Check those out. That's brand new to the FFPC family as well. Okay. This week was an awesome week of shows. I was on Scott Hoyt's Under the Hoodie podcast. You can check that out. I believe that should be out here shortly if it's not already. That was fun. Tuesday night, Wilson Moy, the 2023 Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament champion, joined me on the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown. You can that's on the RotoViz podcast feed. You can check that out there. Last night, we had on Don O'Connell, the 19-time FFPC League champion, hanging out with me and Farrell Elliott on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Audio versions out anywhere you get podcasts, as well as the video version on YouTube. And then obviously you saw the show tonight. And then tomorrow night, we are welcoming in 40-time FFPC League champion Todd Aaron, along with Farrell Elliott and myself on HSFF Hour Extra Reps. That airs at 10 p.m. tomorrow night. So a lot of great stuff. We'll have more live shows for you next week as well. For Steve O'Rourke, I'm Eric Balkman. Next week, we will be back on this show at 7 p.m. Thursday with Establish the Run and player profilers Ryan Reynolds. He will join me for 2 full hours, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Haven't had Ryan on this time of year before, so I think we're going to get into some fun stuff when we talk about odds and awards and everything like that. So that is going to be next Thursday at 7 p.m. for 2 hours on the next episode of FFPC Insider Access. Again, for Steve O'Rourke, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been FFPC Insider Access. Be good, everybody, and we will talk to you on HSFF Hour Extra Reps tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern.